Hey, Monica, did you know it's now even easier to listen to Round the Hay Bale podcast?
What? Really? How easy?
That's right. All you have to do is say, Alexa, play Round the Hay Bale podcast.
Playing Round the Hay Bale podcast on Apple Music.
Ooh, we're really fancy now.
Tune in to Round the Hay Bale every Monday at 9 a.m. Central Time.
Grab a cup of joe and let's gather round that hay bale. With your hosts, Ann from Andale Homestead, Cayce from Ormsby Farms, Monica from Bland's Promised Land Ranch, and Sandi from Suburban Homesteader, Wyoming, Arizona. Here they are. Hey, y'all, hey.
Hey, y'all. Hey, welcome in to our podcast today. I'm Ann from Andale Homestead.
And I'm Sandi from Suburban Homesteader, Wyoming, Arizona.
I'm Monica from Bland's Promised Land Ranch.
And hello, everyone. It's Cayce from Ormsby Farm. And we are excited to do this follow-up episode. On the last episode, we talked a little bit about garden math and knowing what you're growing in your garden. And we're going to kind of elaborate a little bit more on that by talking about fruit trees. We're going to talk about eggs, and we're going to talk about meat. So all the other stuff that we didn't touch in on talking about tomatoes and peppers, all that fun stuff in the garden. So I'm going to throw it first to Sandi, who is the queen of fruit trees, because me and her have talked off the recording and has blown my mind with all the knowledge of stuff that I'm doing wrong with my fruit trees.
Well, fruit trees is one of those homestead maths that it breaks all the rules because you plant 2 apple trees, but maybe for 2 or 3 years, you don't even get an apple. But then all of a sudden you get 40 apples and then you get bushels of apples from your trees. So the math doesn't add up, but it's perfect for a homestead. And then you can switch those trees and go, okay, can I graft onto those trees? Can I have different varieties on those same trees? Can I add peaches? Can I add plums? Can I add different fruits onto my homestead to increase that homesteading math? And it is amazing what fruit trees can do to a homestead.
I love that because, the first couple years we did trees, Eric and I we talked about this a little bit off the recording, but Eric and I went and got some trees from the Home Depot. We were super excited. Eric's like, we're going to do trees. It's going to be amazing. We're going to have fruit. We're going to have our own apples. He was really good about saying, what do we like to eat fruit wise? What do the kids really like? We love apples. We love plums. We love, all the things. And so he's like, we're going to get apple trees and we're going to do this. Peaches. It's going to be amazing. And we got the trees, we put them in the ground, and we didn't know anything about it. And I said, look, I'm dealing with my garden. You do the apples, you do all the trees. So he became the tree guy. I will say that the tree guy did not know enough about trees. So we had one of the apple trees die, and then the second one died. And then the third one was just done. It was done with life. It didn't want to survive without its friends. And so I think when you know more about where to plant them, how to plant them together, and when you finally start learning all those details, like we took time to do, and we've been here now in Texas for 10 years, and I think we've had fruit trees for now 8 years consecutively. We finally have fruit. Last year and the year before were last year was the first year I got enough plums from my plum tree that I made plum jelly and plum barbecue sauce. I mean, I had been dreaming of taking a fruit harvest and making stuff with it for years. And last year was the first year we actually had a harvest big enough that I was throwing it out to the pigs at some point because we had so many things. So I think what Sandi said is such an amazing point, because you expect to get something and then it doesn't really make sense in your mind. And then all of a sudden you have this huge, amazing harvest. And some years you may have not that much, but I just think it's great because it can add so much to your homestead, but you got to know about it. And trees really are those things you really got to dig in a little deeper, I think, before you make that commitment, because there's a lot to it. Sandi, you wanted to add something to that?
Well, I do, because you have to know when you're figuring homestead math, it's not just how many trees can I put on my property. With apple trees, there are apple trees that are called early apples, mid apples, late apples. They bloom at different times. So if you got an early and a late, the bloom times would not be the same, and you would never get apples. Now, certain apples are a little bit self-fertile. You'll get a few apples just because the wind pollinated them, some bees pollinated them a little bit. And those are diploid apples, that it's all about chromosomes. But if you had a triploid, you would never get an apple without another apple that was blooming at the same time. There's different plums. So obviously, Monica has plums that can cross-pollinate. But European plums, American plums, wild plums, they don't always flower at the same time. They don't always cross-pollinate. So you have to just know those things. And it's not just fruit trees. What about nut trees on your property? They're more of a long term, but they can just be spectacular on a farm or a homestead.
Wow.
Oh, I agree. I think also we talk about it all the time, being community sustainable. It's knowing your neighbor. If your neighbor has a bunch of pecans that are over there on their tree, I'm just throwing it out there because mine does, and I get a lot of pears on mine. It's a good little swap. Knowing when you're doing your homesteading math, do you play nice with your neighbors? That's an equation that you probably need to factor in so that the bartering and the trading can be done for certain things that you either can't have on your homestead or don't want on your homestead, don't want to wait the time to do it.
Right.
So that's another equation that you want to throw in there.
Yeah, that's a great thing. We have a fig tree that was planted back in the 70s that before Worth and I bought our property. And so I don't know what kind of fig tree it is. It was planted back in probably 77, 78, 1970. Got to add the 19 now. But it is wonderful. This particular fig flowers and fruits and they come ripe in the fall, closer to the fall. And Sandi, I had not even thought about, I bought 2 apple trees because I knew, and I bought 2 different types of apple trees because I knew that they needed a friend. Didn't even occur to me to think that the 2 apple trees that I have may never bloom at the same time. That never even entered my brain cycle there. So thank you for that information.
Now, if your neighbor has a crab apple maybe down the street or down the road, a crab apple blooms for a very long time, and crab apple will pollinate an apple tree.
Okay.
And so that's good. But so you have your fruit trees in there. Why not segue and have maybe your chickens running under your fruit trees, pigs, cattle, as long as you have a little guard around the trunk, they can eat that fruit that's dropping. You can figure that in your homestead math too.
Okay. And I really like the idea that you were talking about as far as a microclimate, to be able to have some things on one of our past episodes, because me being, YouTube see, YouTube do, I wanted to have a lemon tree. I wanted to have a lemon tree. So I went to Florida and I bought a Meyer lemon tree. It's not but about 1.5 feet tall right now, but it already has some lemons on it. And I haven't taken it out of the pot because I don't know where to plant it. But I do have a greenhouse. And I bet that thing would rock and roll in that because it's much more tropical inside that greenhouse. I mean, what do y'all think?
It would grow in a greenhouse. You just have to be careful, depending on the angle of your sun to the greenhouse, that if it's a warm day, you need those doors open. Now, a lemon tree is tropical, but your greenhouse can get 120, 140 degrees if you keep those doors closed.
Right.
And you can kill every soil microbe in there, all your plants in there. So you just have to be aware. But before we started going to Arizona also, I had lemon trees, orange trees, citrus tree, a whole bunch of citrus trees. Every spring, Joe would haul them outside when it was warm enough. And in the fall time, he would haul them back. So
in Wyoming, you had Citrus trees.
Yeah.
That's
So it's not like you
amazing.
can't have on your homestead what you want. You just may have to work a little bit harder.
That's so cool.
Yeah, that's one of the things that after you had said that, I visited a friend of ours who lives about an hour south of us here in Texas. So he's a little further. He's a little closer to, the Gulf, but he's not that much further, right? He's just an hour, right? And I went there and I go to his house, and he's another YouTuber. And he's built this massive greenhouse. When I say massive, I mean, Cayce, it's bigger than your greenhouse. It is a structure that is meant to specifically grow trees inside.
Oh
So
my
he
God.
specifically has a greenhouse built in this. I mean, it's as big as a house, like it's huge. And he's got these trees. So he has lemon trees, orange trees. He's got them growing inside this big greenhouse, and it is phenomenal. Now he's patient, and I saw one of the videos recently that he's got. He actually has grapefruit growing in that tree, in that greenhouse as well. So,
my goodness.
and for me, I got 2 little lemon trees from him. We did last year or 2 years ago, and we brought it home. And Eric's like, we got to put them in the greenhouse. Blah blah blah. They were in pots, and he moved them in the greenhouse, and he moved them out of the greenhouse, and he moved them in the greenhouse, but he forgot them in the greenhouse one time. And we burnt the heck out of them things. They got burnt up. He was like, I don't know why they're not growing. I'm like, probably because it was 850 degrees in there. but it's important to know. But it's cool because you can grow. If you want to grow something, just grow it. But be aware of what you're growing and dig in a little bit. Maybe open up a little bit of a book or YouTube.
Maybe give it a little bit of air. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's okay. I was the same way. I was Eric's twin because I have a 30-foot by 55-foot greenhouse. Or mine's more of a high tunnel. And first year I was like, I'm growing everything in there. I'm doing onions and potatoes, and I kept the rolling down sides all the way down. So it was like 4 billion degrees, and all those onions and potatoes said, yeah, sorry, bro, we're going to die. We'll see you later. And I couldn't grow anything in there, but I was like, oh, Cayce, let's get a little airflow in your greenhouse. So that I am wanting to get fruit trees, Ms. Ann, to put in my greenhouse as well. That's the long-term goal.
Of course, I didn't know until I read the tags when I got back home, and it said, do not cross state lines, stay in Florida. And I went, oops, I would just throw that tag away real quick.
You just admitted to breaking the law
on
a podcast.
Oh, no.
Well, I will say that, we were talking about growing these trees, growing these plants, and how we're accidentally, maybe some of us are accidentally killing them. But, when it comes to homesteading math, you got to be mindful, do a little research when you're starting to grow those animals, because you may have a desire to incubate.
A lot more research. Yes, a lot more.
But here's the thing. So many of us get excited and they fall victim to chicken math, or we call it poultry math here. But then they grow all these animals and then you don't know what to do with them. Okay. So I will say, it is a cautionary tale of making sure that you know how to raise an animal or know how to take care of that animal if you have an animal and you want to grow your own meats. So let's just say you're going to grow your own meats and eggs and things like that. You're growing your homestead in that way. Just make sure you know how to take care of it. And you don't have to make it hard. You don't have to read every single book on chickens to have a chicken. You don't. It's okay if you do a little research, you go on YouTube, you see a couple videos, you're like, okay, I think I can do this. You get that underneath of you, and experience can be your, one of your best teachers. Just be mindful you don't experience yourself right into digging a hole and throwing in that poor little chicken out, because that has happened many times to people. Or you have whatever your animal you're growing, just kind of make sure you're practicing good husbandry, and making sure you kind of know how to care for that animal. So, we grow a lot of our own meat here, and that's kind of where I think we're going to take this discussion for a minute. Cayce, did you have something to add to that?
I did, yes, because really, I'm glad that you are the one that segued into that, because Monica has been the person that I have been blowing up the phone this past year. For most of y'all that follow me know that we started our meat business this year for poultry. And so you freak out because you're like, oh my goodness, what have I just done? Like, we just had 15 turkeys hatch, and you look at those 15 turkeys and you're like, you're crazy. You are literally crazy. So I'd hit Monica up and be this. Can I ask you this? Okay. What about this? What about this? Do your research on these animals, whether they're for eggs or whether they're for meat. Know how many hens you should have with one male, because from experience, having too many or too less of females with too many roosters is damaging to those hens, and you're not going to get that amount of eggs that you want. The hens will not produce what they're supposed to produce. Some may not even eat all what they're supposed to. If you're raising them up and you're going to process them, they may not eat as much. They hide away. Know what it is, Monica. It's what, 20 to 1 rooster? Is that kind of what they roughly say, quote unquote?
Oh, I don't know. I just basically say, well, however many roosters annoy you, just keep one less. Because
Yeah, see, I just keep one.
Yeah, I mean, like I have a bunch of chickens. I don't want to talk about how many chickens I have because Eric will hear that, and I don't really want to have that discussion with him again. But we have a lot of chickens, and I have a lot of roosters, and basically we just go, okay, yeah, there's a lot more than we need, and we just try to get. I mean, there's definitely some sort of actual math number in there, but you can tell when your chickens are being bullied. You can tell when your poultry is being bullied, when your ducks and when your turkeys, and when it's too much. Because, it's not just chickens. I mean, and the thing is too, you don't have to raise them. Maybe you don't want to process your own meat. Maybe you don't want to raise your animals for meat. Maybe you just want the eggs, or maybe you don't eat eggs, but maybe your family does, or maybe your neighbor does. Maybe you like the way chickens look and you have fun with the chickens. So even if you don't eat eggs, you can always give the eggs away or sell the eggs. Make it a business. Keep it fun. Cause I'm all about, if I make it too much of a business, then I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. Yeah. That's literally the way my brain works. It makes it once it becomes like a business, now it becomes less fun for me somehow. It's just like a switch that goes off in my brain. Then it just becomes not fun. But when you have fun with it, and like Casey's doing, even if maybe you just hatch out babies, maybe you're incubating eggs, which we're going to talk about on, I believe, another episode, maybe talk about incubating eggs. But when you incubate eggs and you're having fun with it, maybe you can't keep all of them. Well, incubate the eggs and then sell the babies, or bless some people that just want babies. Maybe you have some friends that have fruit trees and you want some of their fruits, and they can give you some fruits and you can give them some babies, because that's what we do. One of the things I wanted to touch on too is that when you talk about being community sustainable and using your community, knowing what you can handle, and the garden, the homesteading math, we do that here. My brother-in-law and sister, they love trees. My brother-in-law is a fruit tree guy. Like, he is the guy for that. He is so smart when it comes to fruit trees. And when Eric's needed tips, he's gone to him, and we've kind of learned a lot. It's like Sandi, right? And we have him on speed dial, and we ask him all the things because he knows it. Well, they have an entire orchard that they're starting and that they're really doing. And they've been working on it for years now. And the coolest thing is that we barter with them all the time. And when they first started their orchard, they said, okay, look, we don't have a space for an in-ground garden like you do right now. And that's not our jam. But what we can do is we can plant extra trees, and we're going to plant extra so that we know that when we have an abundance of this fruit, would you guys be willing? Are you interested in apples? Do you like this? Do you like that? Because we don't have this, we have the space, but we don't want to give up the space for all those trees. So maybe you don't want to give up the space for this animal or this particular thing. That's when you work with people and use your whole space as a community to kind of work together to grow the food that you want to eat or grow the things you want to raise, because they do the fruit, we do the meat and some of the veggies, and we work together as a team to kind of get what we need to be sustainable that way as a group. And I think that needs to be part of your math, that think about those things. If I can't grow it, maybe my friend can, maybe my neighbor is. And that's what Sandi was saying and Cayce was saying, if your neighbor's growing it, then why not work together and kind of do something with them? We do grow our own meat here. We grow pork, we grow beef, we grow all these animals, and not everybody can grow these animals. So we work with people to kind of barter and do it that way. And we got to know your space. Don't get pigs if you don't have a space for pigs, or you don't have a proper fencing for pigs, or whatever it is. That's important to know that animal enough that you're probably able to take care of it too.
That's right.
Well, I think that Monica is just spot on this, because she is really making you think, okay, I have this much area. What can I do? Because when you have chickens, we can only have 5 here. So the space isn't huge. But if you had a lot of chickens, say you had 100 chickens, how much space do you actually have? Can you let the chickens roam into other areas? because that's all part of the garden math, the homesteading math, so that you are proper stewards of everything that you have, from your vegetables to your trees to your chickens, pork, beef. Are you doing the best for them? Because it's not all about you. It's not all about what you want. It's also about what those animals need, what
Right.
those plants need.
God, it's so cool that you think that way. I just think that's so wonderful.
Well, I
And
think, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Ann.
no, I was going to say, and Monica, you had a thought on that.
Yeah. So, when she said that about what your soil needs. So we did an entire video on one of the things that we like to do in the off season for our garden, because some people garden the entire year and you can garden for a lot of the year, and that's fine. Every other year or so, or depending on what's going on. I mean, there's seasons of life that you just can't handle a fall garden. There are some seasons of life that you can't do a garden at all because whatever's going on in your life, it's just too much for you. That's fine. So in those seasons that we've had where we've not done a fall garden, we open up our garden space, we put our pigs in there, we close off that space, and we rotate our pigs throughout our garden. We have an entire video on how we use our pigs to turn over the soil in our garden. And yes, they're pooping in there. Yes, they're peeing in there. They're eating all the junk but they are turning that soil over for us that we don't have to till. And they're in there early enough that we can add compost to what they're putting into our ground. And
Right.
we're able to turn that over enough that it's fine. Some people may not want pig poop in their garden. That's fine. We throw all that in our compost if we can, if it's there. It's not something we prefer to use all the time, but we know what we're feeding them. We know what
Right.
we're putting in our garden, and you have to feel comfortable doing that and making those decisions. But we let our chickens and ducks in there certain times of year. If you get Muscovy ducks, for instance, they're fantastic foragers. You can let them in your garden and they're going to eat all those bugs that you don't want to have to deal with. So if you know the animal that you're putting in certain spaces, you'll know what they eat, what they like to eat, what they're not going to nibble on, and you can let them into your garden. You can let them around your fruit trees. You can let them around your nut trees. You can put them in spaces. We have a persimmon tree out front. We had no idea what it was for a long time. We just figured it's some sort of plant that's dropping these fruits. And we finally started realizing, oh my gosh, the pigs love these persimmons. So we would literally grab buckets of persimmons and let the kids throw them to the pigs, or put the pigs in the front of the yard for a little bit, rotationally put them in our front yard and let them graze. We let our cows in our yard too to eat the fresh grass. My son, who's supposed to be mowing our yard on a weekly basis, literally went out there yesterday afternoon, weed whacked around the edges, and then let the cattle in the front yard for about an hour and a half so that he didn't have to mow. Because if you know what your animals need.
I was about to say that was a smart move right there.
No,
It's a smart move.
I was like, why didn't you do this? And he was like, oh yeah, they were like, oh no, Jonathan let the cows in the yard. I was like, so we didn't have to mow because the grass was up to her like knees almost. But you know what your animals need and use it for it, And Sandi, I think you wanted to add something to that too, because it's important.
Well, one of the benefits, say I have a friend in California that his extra apples that are on the ground, they let the pigs eat. And the meat changes from what you let your pigs are eating. So if they have this addition to all these apples, different fruits, their meat tastes different. And so use that to your benefit, because you're going to have to do something with those fallen fruits anyway. Compost or something, but why not let your chickens eat them, the pigs eat them, the cows eat them, and have the benefit of a sweeter, tenderer meat?
Exactly. It works so well together. And I think it's awesome because you're really looking at what God's giving you. And like Sandi said, being good stewards, you're taking everything that God's already put together to work together. Because if we weren't involved, if a human wasn't involved, then I feel like nature would already kind of do its thing anyway, right? I mean, the animals would already be eating that fallen fruit. The trees would be pollinating. They would be growing next to each other that work the best. Things would kind of work cohesively without us. So we just kind of get in there and make it our own space. We try to get in there and we try to control these things. But if we have a space and we can kind of step it back into what it would look like naturally and still make it work for us, I mean, it's such an amazing opportunity to get in there, to grow our own foods, to grow and to have that equation work for us in the end, just putting everything together and working it out. I don't know. It's awesome. It's awesome to look at. So,
I'm really well, my master gardener friends call me an apple nerd, because I love fruit trees. I love apples especially. But there are certain problem areas in the country that have a lot of snails and slugs. So maybe you're having issues, and ducks will go in there and they will just eat every slug, every snail that's bothering your trees. So what do you have for farm animals that can actually not just benefit from the fruit, but can actually help you in your area that maybe you're having a problem with?
Oh yeah, and I agree also with knowing those different tips, especially with the ducks, like in the snails. Did not know that. Now it's another reason that I have to have ducks now. I've been saying I'm gonna get ducks. I need to get ducks. But I think also, since we're talking math, before we wrap this episode up, is when people go into raising animals, whether it's for eggs or whether it's for meat, I think a lot of people expect a quick turnaround. Don't. I think that would be my one tip is don't. Any type of business, homesteading, whatever business it is, usually give it about 5 years, I think is what everyone says. Give it about 5 years for it to be profitable. And profitable can mean you made $1 that year, okay? When you're going into growing your own meat, the first year, yes, you may have meat, but it may be $900 steak that you're eating. But it will slowly over time pay itself out. And this is something that you need to know and put in your into your math. And I know from talking to Monica's talking about cattle takes 18 to 24 months from birth to giving birth, because we talked about this before. To have more babies, you need a boy and a girl. If you want eggs to hatch, you need a boy and a girl. And then you got 18 more months to process the meat. So we're now at 36 months. For anybody doing the math, that's 3 years. I don't know why I'm holding up 3 fingers like people can see me, but 3 years before you're even getting meat. That's not saying profitable meat. That's saying meat off of that investment that you put there. Pigs being 3 months, 3 weeks, 3 days. Again, I'm holding up a 3 like people can see. You still got to get those pigs that now you got to wait for those pigs to get to a breeding age. Then you got to wait the 3 months, 3 weeks, 3 days for them to give birth. And then from there, depending on what you're feeding the pigs, because we're dabbling in pigs right now. Me and Monica have been talking about that, is how long till they're feed ready. It could be 5 to 6 months if you're feeding just grain. It could be 9 months if you're, trying to be healthy and give them, the lettuce and all that kind of stuff. So know what you're getting into. Know that more than likely, now chickens and turkeys are a little bit different, but know when you're growing your own meat, it's not going to be right away that you're making a profit or you're in the positive for your homestead, and work that in to the math. What do you think about that, Sandi?
Well, I think one other thing to think about when you're doing animals, you have to consider that in your math, your homesteading math, there could be vet bills. That it is not just you get a little pig or you get a calf, and you may not ever have bills. You have to figure that all in. So I'm going to have this amount of chickens. What if they get sick? What do I have to do? You have to be able to really think about, and it goes back to being that good steward, and right. Can your family afford that? Because that's maybe right. At that time they might not be able to afford that. Right.
Or you could always marry a vet. I always joke, and I'm like, Mom, if you want to just go ahead and just remarry a vet, that'd be real helpful right about now. But no, that's true. I mean, because these are living things. And as you said, you got to be good stewards to them. Yes. And being able to take care of these animals, even if they're just for meat, that's even more reason to take care of those sweet babies while they're growing to give you food. So be good to them. Their meat will be good to you. Know your homesteading math. And y'all, I think we're going to wrap up this episode again for knowing what you grow. This has been a great 2-part series. I hope you all enjoyed it. Make sure you're tuning in on Fridays for our live show. We're going to be talking a little bit more each of the Fridays about the garden math, about homesteading math, so you won't want to miss it. We will see everyone on the next episode of Around the Hay Bale Season 5, Digging Deep. And until we see you then, y'all take care. We'll see you next Monday.
Are you enjoying the Hay Bale topics? To learn more, click on the LinkTree link to get all our product recommendations along with discount codes and more.